No other king could vanquish the warhorse or silence the warrior's rage while riding the lowly back of a donkey. No other king could break the dominion of darkness, the tyranny of evil, with a reign of grace and a kingdom of peace. No other king could give his life for the redemption of rebels, his wealth to welcome the outcast. Jesus is that king, the King of glory, Son of the living God. Not just another king, not just another prophet, not just another teacher. He was the one the world had been waiting for, the one to deliver us from captivity, the Son of David and Abraham's chosen seed. He is the goal of the Mosaic law, Yahweh in the flesh. He is the one to establish God's reign and rule, to heal the sick, give sight to the blind, freedom to the prisoners, and proclaim good news to the poor. This Jesus was the Creator come to earth and the beginning of a new creation. He embodied the covenant, fulfilled the commandments, and reversed the curse. This Jesus is the Christ that God spoke of to the serpent, the one prefigured to Noah in the flood, the one promised to Abraham, the one guaranteed to Moses before he died, the one promised to David during his reign, the one revealed to Isaiah as a suffering servant, the one predicted through the prophets and prepared for through John the Baptist. He is the Father's Son, Savior of the world, and substitute for our sins. More loving, more holy, and more wonderfully terrifying than we ever thought possible. He is our Jesus, and there is no other king like him. He is our God, our glory, our victorious Savior. There is no other king like him. There is no other king.
1,000 years before Jesus was born, it was written about the Israelite people that in those days they had no king. And everyone did as they saw fit. And as we read through the book of Judges, in that part of the Bible that so many of us like to avoid, the Old Testament, because it's full of so many uncomfortable stories, we read these stories of men and women who were doing everything as they saw fit to make them happy. And so as we read through these stories, we see men and women breaking vows. We see men and women participating in prostitution. We see men and women participating in murder. We see men and women sacrificing their children so that they can get ahead in life. We see men and women who are trying to gain power, and by doing so, enslaving other people and putting other people underneath them. And we read story after story that makes us uncomfortable because we read these stories as this is what God is saying it means to follow Him. This is what it means to live in God's kingdom, until we run across those lines that in those days, they had no king. And everyone did as they saw fit. And what they began to realize is that in a world where everyone does as they see fit, where everyone gets to be their own king, where everyone gets to set their own laws, where everyone gets to you be you, where everyone gets to live that life, it doesn't work. And so they went to God. They went to the one who had led them out of slavery in Egypt. They went to the one who had led them through the wilderness. They went to the one who had parted the seas for them. They went to that one who had shown them what life could be like if they would just be united, if they would work together, if they would make life about more than themselves. They went to that one who had shown them how it could work. And they said, "Give us another king. Give us somebody else. Doesn't matter what our history has been with you. It doesn't matter what you've shown us to be true. We've tried it your way and that worked, so we decided to try it our way and that didn't. So give us a king to rule over us just like all the other people have, because we want to be like them. We don't want to be set apart. We don't want to be different. We want to be like them. And so God answered their wish and he gave them a king. But he warned them ahead of time that these earthly kings, they will not rule over you with love. They will not rule over you with peace. They will not provide the happiness that they will promise, but instead, when they decide to go to war for their own good, they will force you to do the fighting for them. They will take your sons and they will put your sons on the front lines of battle so that your sons' lives will be lost. They will take your daughters and they will put them into sexual slavery. They will rule over you with an iron fist. Not with a loving fist, not with a loving open hand. They said, we want one anyway. And so God gave them a king, and all the words began to come true. All the things that God had told them would happen began to come true. These kings would come, and these kings would make promises. If you'll worship this God, if you'll serve me in this way, if you'll go to battle to fight my battles, if you'll give me your wealth, I'll provide you with happiness. I'll provide you with comfort. I'll provide you with peace. And over and over and over again, it didn't work. The promises came back empty because the promises were never intended to be kept. In 2001, some friends of mine decided that I needed to run for senior class president. Not because they thought I was great, not because they thought I would be good at it, but because they thought that I would be better than the other person who was running for senior class president. So I decided, why not? I'll run for senior class president. One day before we were getting ready to take our vote, I put my name in the hat. And I got up and I gave my speech, and I'd heard all the speeches before of the things that a class president was going to do, so I stood up there in front of my class, and I said, I will make this promise to you. I promise you nothing today. I have heard the promises every single year that we're going to get stalls on the men's bathroom doors so that after lunch, when you go to the bathroom, you don't have to see somebody sitting on the pot taking a dump. I've heard the promise every year. I'm not going to promise it to you. We're probably going to continue to see our friends going to the bathroom when we go in after lunch. It's just going to happen. I've heard the promises every year that we're going to get a vending machine put in here because in those days, vending machines were not in every school. I stood up in front of them and I said, I've heard that promise. You know what I'm going to do? I'm going to promise you nothing. We might get a vending machine, but it probably won't have anything to do with what I did. It's probably going to have to do with the faculty deciding it's time for us to get a vending machine. And I went through the list of promises that have been made, and every single one of them I said, I'm not going to promise you that. I will promise you this. I will take the title of class president, and I will have it for the rest of my life, but I don't guarantee you that I'm going to get anything done. And then an hour later, when the results came in, I became the senior class president of Trigo Community High School of the class of 2002. And 5 years later, when we had a class reunion that I didn't even realize happened at 5 years, their senior class president did nothing to organize the class reunion. During the course of the year, their senior class president met twice with his cabinet because he was told he had to. And I don't remember a single conversation that we had. But what I can proudly say is I broke no promises. Not a single one. I wasn't going to stand up there and give them false promises, so I gave them none instead. Other than if they voted for me, I could promise them that something might get done, but most likely nothing would. And it worked. Humanity is littered with broken promises. Everywhere we look, the landfill of humanity is full of promise after promise that's been broken. The career says, hey, come chase me. Work your way up the ladder. And in doing so, you're going to get influence. You're going to get power. Don't worry about what it takes to get up there. Don't worry about who's on the rung behind you. Just find their finger and smash it so they can't catch you. And if that person's in front of you, you grab them by the back of the drawers and you just yank them down and you throw them down the ladder. Because the thing that's going to give you worth in life is to get as high up on the career ladder as you possibly can. We see it with our athletes all the time. They go out there, and in order to get respect, they have to be the highest paid athlete. But it turns out the next year, they're no longer the highest paid athlete. We see it in the corporate world, that even those who are running the biggest businesses in the entire world look around and they see that that business might catch me. So I better continue to be cutthroat about the way that I live my life. Broken promises. It's not a life fulfilled. It's not a life full of worth. A career is a good thing until it becomes the thing in your life. Or what about money? Money says, come to me. Come serve me. If you serve me, you can buy all the things that are going to make you happy. You can have all the toys. You can have the big fancy house. Come to me and worship me, serve me, and I'll provide you with all the desires of your heart. But when was the last time you talked to somebody who made money the most important thing in their lives that actually had enough money? That actually said, you know what? I'm at the point where I have enough. Now, you may have talked to someone who says, I have enough money, but my bet is that they're not somebody who makes money the thing that they serve and the thing that they worship. They just happen to have it. Technology tells us, come to me, and I will make you a part of a world that you've been craving to be a part of. Come to me and share all the fake secrets of your life, and I'll make you a part of something. Come to me and see all the things going on in your friends' lives, and you'll finally feel like you're part of something. And instead, we walk away and we go, why am I always on the outside looking in? Why can't my life look like that person's life? Why can't I experience what they have? I better lie about this so that they can be jealous of me as I look at their life that they're lying about that I'm jealous of. Broken promises laid out in front of us. And the list could go on and on. I'll edit some of it out because we've got children in the room this morning. But physical activity, we'll just call it that way. What if we chase after that and we make that the God of our lives? We serve that. That'll make us happy. And instead, we continue to look at that landfill and we see it littered with broken promises. Not people who will stand up, not things that will stand up and say, hey, I'm not going to promise you anything. But instead that make us promises that it can't fulfill. But what if there was a king who actually did follow through on his promises? What if there was a leader who actually, when a promise was made, it happened and it came to fruition? What if those promises were things that actually brought us worth in our life? A king who would make a promise that, hey, I'm not going to promise you riches, but I will promise you that you will have enough. I will promise you that your needs will be met. You may not be rich by this world's standards, but you will have enough. What if there was a king who said, I'm not going to promise you fame. You may not be YouTube famous or TikTok famous or whatever other famous we have out there these days. I'm not going to guarantee you any of that, but what I will guarantee you is that you can have a life that is worth living, a life that will make a difference in other people's lives. No, the whole world may not know your name, but you will not be forgotten after you die because of the difference that you have made. What if there was a king who said, I don't need to fight with my lawmakers about whether or not men and women should be equal, because I have already created them all to be equal. And I treated them all as equal, and I continue to treat them all as equal. I understand that some of my followers don't treat them all as equal, but I do. You don't have to fight women for equity in my kingdom, because you already have it in my kingdom. You don't have to fight for racial equality in my kingdom, because in my kingdom, every individual is made in the image of God. And they are all loved and valued in my eyes. And my true followers see it the exact same way. And I proved it when I walked among everyone. What if there was a king who could promise us those things, who could promise us that your life, it's not going to be easy. You're still going to have loss. You're still going to have sorrow. You're still going to have pain. You're still going to have people who dislike you and mistreat you, but it will be worth every minute. And you can get to the end of your life in my kingdom, this physical life in my kingdom, and look back and say, I don't regret the life that I lived in that kingdom. If there was a king who could promise you those things and fulfill those things so that maybe our version of happiness isn't met, but a version of worth and peace and love and joy is exuberated out of all of us, would you want to follow that king? I wonder if this morning I can introduce you to that king.
Here is a man who was born in an obscure village, the child of a peasant woman. He grew up in another obscure village. He worked in a carpenter's shop until he was 30, and then for 3 years he was an itinerant teacher. He never wrote a book. He never held an office. He never owned a home. He never had a family. He never went to college. He never traveled, except in his infancy, more than 200 miles from the place where he was born. He never did one of the things that usually accompanies greatness. He had no credentials but himself. While he was still a young man, the tide of popular opinion turned against him. His friends ran away. One of them denied him. He was turned over to his enemy. He went through a mockery of a trial. He was nailed upon a cross between two thieves. His executioners gambled with the only piece of property he had on earth, his seamless robe. When he was dead, he was taken down from the cross and laid in a borrowed grave through the courtesy of a friend. 20 wide centuries have come and gone, and today, he is the centerpiece of the human race. All the navies that ever were built, all the parliaments that ever sat, and all the kings that ever reigned, put together, have not affected the life of man upon this earth as powerfully as has this one solitary life.
Then Pilate went back into his headquarters and called for Jesus to be brought to him. "Are you the king of the Jews?" he asked him. And Jesus replied, "Is this your own question, or did others tell you about me?" "Am I a Jew?" Pilate retorted. "Your own people and their leading priests brought you to me for trial. Why? What have you done?" Jesus answered, "My kingdom is not an earthly kingdom. If I were, my followers would fight to keep me from being handed over to the Jewish leaders. But my kingdom is not of this world." And Pilate said, "So you are a king?" To which Jesus responded, "You have said it." What was it? What was it about this man, this solitary life, this king, that has us 2,000 years later still coming together on a Sunday morning to talk about his life? Why are we here this morning? Why is it that 300 years after he died, the emperor of Rome decided to make Christianity the state religion? Why would that happen? Why are we here? Why did that happen then? Why are we here now, dissecting his words, desiring to follow him, wondering if this man who lived 2,000 years ago is really worth following, if his words have any credence? I'll tell you this, it's not because of the easy things that he taught. It's not because he came out and he gave us all these flowery little ideas that we were supposed to listen to. No, instead, he came out and he said, "Hey, you know those enemies that you want to kill? I need you to love them. You know those people that you say that you could never forgive what they did?" I mean, we can all sit here and think of somebody who did that one thing that we're like, there is no way I could forgive that. He says, no, that thing you need to forgive. It's not because his teachings on hell were easy. Oh, in the church 2,000 years later, we don't like to talk about hell because it makes people uncomfortable. But Jesus didn't shy away from it. Jesus told people about it. He told them that you are making the choice now as to whether or not you will serve me ever again in the kingdom. You can make the choice to never again have to be in my presence. The choice is yours. Oh, he never taught us that he's going to send us to hell if we misbehave or we disobey. But he did teach us that if we choose not to be a part of his kingdom, he will honor that choice for all of eternity. That's not a comfortable teaching for us to hear. It is not his easy teachings that draw people to him, that have drawn people to him for the last 2,000 years. It's not because his life was glamorous. It's not because he lived in a big old house and had all this power that everybody saw. And it's not because he was walking around with all sorts of money. And it's not because he got to live in a nice, comfortable place. But rather, he says, I have no place to lay my head. If you're going to follow me, that's going to be your life too. Hey, you have a lot of money. Great. Be ready to give it all away. When they came to him and they said, we're surrounded by people and they're hungry, he didn't say, take it out of my checking account. He said, bring me some bread and some fish and I'm going to multiply that. When it was time to pay a tax, he had to go get money out of a fish's mouth. Money wasn't, I guess in that case, money was pouring in, but that's the exception. It wasn't because of the glamorous life that he lived or the easy teachings that he gave, but rather it was because of the example he set of how to treat other people. Because the low and the downcast and the poor and the weak and the sick, they found a king who cared about them. They found a king who wanted to elevate their status, not to elevate them above others, but to elevate them to others. They found a king who went to the women of the day who nobody thought were worth anything, who were just property, and he said, you are so much more than property. He went to the children who were supposed to keep their mouths shut, and he said, no, bring them to me, because I love these children. In fact, the rest of you need to learn how to be like these children again. And 2,000 years later, we're still trying to figure out how to be like children again once we get out of, 10 years old. I see it in every worship service where the children are having a great time and the adults are like, if I move, somebody's going to judge me, and we become afraid. He says, no, in my kingdom, you don't have to be afraid. I'm going to take away that fear. It has to do with how he died. And not because he died on a cross. Like, that doesn't make me want to follow him. Like, wait, that's going to be my future? I'm going to be on a cross? Wait, you told me in those teachings that I was going to have to carry my cross daily. That doesn't sound fun either. But how he went to a cross and he died and he suffered the worst of torture for you and 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 me. How he showed us what it means to die for your friends and to die for your family. He showed us what it means to care so much about other people that you will literally give your own life for them. But it also has to do, as great as that would be, it also has to do with this little teeny tiny detail where he didn't stay dead. If that hadn't happened, you and I would probably not be sitting here right now. We might still talk about him. We might still talk about his teachings, but we would probably not be following him or desiring to follow him or knowing somebody who pulled us along who desires to follow him. We probably would not be sitting in this place right now if not for that little piece where he defeated death, the tomb was empty, and he rose again from the dead. I know we have our doubts as to whether or not that happens. I know that the world has thrown all sorts of different things at us, but there is, in my mind, no other logical explanation that his followers would have continued to follow him, would have continued to go to their death, other than that they truly believed that this man rose from the dead. I wouldn't do it, and I don't think you would do it. I wouldn't walk around saying, no, I promise you, my brother John, he rose from the dead. I know you've not seen him, but I promise you, he rose from the dead. And as I'm hanging on a cross, I'm still saying, no, really, he rose from the dead. I wouldn't do it. There's no other logical explanation that they would do what they did if not for the fact that he did what he did. We don't believe it because some book tells us to believe it. We believe it because of what the eyewitnesses said then, and we believe it because of what the eyewitnesses say now. The eyewitnesses then to a resurrected life, and the eyewitnesses now to multiple resurrected lives, day in and day out. Many of you are one of those resurrected lives. And we get to be the eyewitnesses to that. And I would say this, if a man says he's going to die, and then he's going to rise from the dead, and then he does it, I think that's a king that we can trust. I think that's a king who will keep his promises. Because if you can keep that promise, what promise can't you keep? If you can keep the promise that even death cannot keep me down, cannot defeat my kingdom. If you can keep that promise, you are a king who can be trusted. You are not a king who goes out or a leader who goes out and gives all these false promises. You are not a leader who goes out and tells the people, I'm going to promise you nothing. But you are a king who has made the promise of, in my kingdom, peace will reign. In my kingdom, love will reign. In my kingdom, all people are equal. In my kingdom, all people are loved. In my kingdom, it doesn't matter what you did because I took care of that. It matters about what you're going to do. That's what I'm worried about. In my kingdom, it's not about climbing the corporate ladder and stomping on fingers and pulling people back. It's about loving people and showing them their worth. And as you do that, you will find your worth. In my kingdom, that's how this works. Yes, I am the king of the kingdom, but I am a king who you love by loving other people. And yes, I realize that my followers are going to mess up repeatedly. I realize that my followers are going to make up stories about me. That my followers are going to tell lies. I have great children. But I know the day is coming when they're going to say that I said something that I never said. And they're going to use it so that their life will be better temporarily. His followers do the same thing. And that's not an excuse for us, but that's also not a knock on the king. That's not a knock on him. And this king remains because he didn't die 2,000 years ago and stay dead. He didn't die 2,000 years ago and just rise from the dead. He didn't die 2,000 years ago, rise from the dead, and ascend into heaven and not die again. But he didn't do all that 2,000 years ago and stop. This king is still followed, and this king can still be trusted because of what he is still doing today. Because of the lives he is still transforming today. Because of the people that he is showing how to love others today. Because the wrecks that he is taking, because of the addictions that he is helping to break, because of the disease of sin that he is helping to heal today. Not just what he did 2,000 years ago, but because of what he does today, when he intercedes for us today, so that we can still be forgiven, so that we can still live in this kingdom for all of eternity, and we don't have to suffer what it is to reject him and to live in eternity in hell, but we can live in an eternity of life with him because of what he is still doing today. I admitted earlier during our 8:30 service that this last week I've really struggled. I didn't intend to share this part of the story with everybody, but I already introduced it, so I might as well just jump in with both feet. This last week I've struggled because every week pastors get up on platforms and they deliver a message. Every Easter, we come in and we celebrate and we get all excited about things. It's kind of like, it's compared to this Super Bowl atmosphere for the church, that we come in here and it's rah, rah, rah. And then like we talked about last week, Monday happens, the next day. Every single stinking year, Monday comes the day after Easter, without fail. And all those things we said we were excited about on Sunday, we forget about on Monday. And so this week I've struggled. Because I'm told that this is the biggest Sunday of the year, but this week what it felt like was just another Sunday of the year. Just another Sunday where pastors are going to get up and they're going to say some things and people are going to get excited, and then Monday's going to happen. And nothing's going to change. All week long, as I was working on siding on the house yesterday, I'm mad at the siding, ready to say words I'm not supposed to say to the siding, and then that transfers over into, why are we doing what we're doing tomorrow? I know, it's not what a pastor's supposed to say on Easter Sunday morning. But this morning I woke up, and I drove into Washington to get some coffee for my wife, to get some breakfast pizza from Casey's for myself. And I sat there in the impressed parking lot waiting for them to open because I got there too early. And I ate my pizza. And I listened to the song that we're about to sing here in just a few minutes. And I realized, you know what? This king rose from the dead. This king rose from the dead. That is not possible, except that he is a king who does the impossible. So if that king can rise from the dead and he can take our mess of lives and he can turn them into something that actually matters, if he can do all of that, then he can do the impossible right here and right now in the lives of anyone who is sitting here. He can, tomorrow morning when we wake up, do the impossible and actually have us remember what today was all about in the first place. That king can do it. I can't do it. I can sit up here and I can use a loud voice and I can walk around all over the place and I can do all those things. I can be excited. I can't do any of it, but that king can. And I thank God that that king is the king and I am not the king. And that's the king that we get to worship this morning. Would you stand this morning as we thank that God, that king, for what he has done? Will you make noise? Will you be ready to bring energy as we thank him this morning for who he is and what he has done? He is the risen King.
Just when I ran out of road, I met a man I didn't know, and he told me that I was not alone. You picked me up, you turned me around, placed my feet on solid ground. I thank the Master, I thank the Savior, because you healed my heart, you changed my choice but to believe. My doubts are burning like ashes in no wind. So long to my old friends and burden and bitterness. You can just keep improving. Hey, no, you ain't welcome here. From now till streets of gold, I'll sing of how you saved my soul. This wayward son has found his way back home. You picked me up, you turned me around, you placed my feet on solid ground. I thank the Master, I thank the Savior, because you healed my heart, you changed my name. Forever free, I'm not the same. I thank the Master, I thank the Savior, I thank God. Get up, get up, get up. Hey. Get up out of that grave. Okay. Get up, get up, get up. Hey. Get up out of that grave. Okay. Get up, get up, get up. Hey. Get up out of that grave. Okay. Get up, get up, get up. Hey. Get up out of that grave. Okay. Hell lost another world. I am free. Yeah. I am free. I am free. Okay. Hell lost another world. I am free. I am free. I am free. Hell lost another world. I am free. Okay. I am free. Okay. I am free. Hell lost another world. I am free. I am free. I am free.
choice is yours this morning. What king are you going to serve? Who is going to be your king? Is it going to be one full of broken promises? I ask you this morning, and I know that some are standing here today and we're saying, I'm perfectly fine with where I am. But if you are sitting here this morning and you are willing to admit that, you know what? This isn't working out. This idea of everyone does as they see fit, this you do you mentality, it's really not working. This pursuit of happiness, I'm not getting to the end where the happiness exists. I'm starting to feel like maybe I've been lied to. And I invite you this morning to rethink your king. I invite you this morning to consider the king who defeated death and who only died in the first place for you and for me. I invite you to consider that king. There are people all over this room who are more than happy to talk to you about what it means to follow that king, to live in that kingdom. And if you grab one person and they look at you and they're like, I'm not comfortable with that, go grab another one. Then tell me about the first person who told you no. Because that's what we get to do. We get to go out and every day tell people about that king, about a risen king who defeated death. I'm supposed to give this nice big rah-rah moment like, let's go out this week and let's do that. But you know what? I'm not actually ready to leave this room. So you can leave whenever you feel like leaving this room. But I think we're just going to worship a little bit longer in here. So you are welcome to stay in here as long as you want. When you decide to leave, go out. And if he's your king, let other people know that he is your king. He loves you. I love you. You are loved.
Get up, get up, get up, get up out of that grave. Get up, get up, get up, get up out of that grave. Okay. Get up, get up, get up, hey. Get up out of that grave. Okay. Get up, get up, get up, hey. Get up out of that grave. Get up, get up, get up out of that grave. Get up out of that grave. Okay. I am free. Have lost little one. I am free. I am free. Heal my heart.